we looked at Peter Kreeft's Four Great Truths, and we noticed that goodness shows up in every answer to the Four Great Truths as an end, or as a means, or as both. Now, I want to show you 5 ways of construing goodness in terms of its end, or its means, or both. Let's go back to Mount Fuji. In Kreeft's schema, we have the ultimate, that which is the most important, that which comes first. And I'm putting that above the top of Mount Fuji because that's not necessarily something we can attain. However, what's closest to it is the top of Mount Fuji, the end or the goal, what aligns with the ultimate. And then we, remember, are down in the fog. The fog represents our present condition or predicament, what he called the symptoms, and those symptoms have an explanation, a diagnosis, which I'm going to characterize as failure. In each of these visions of goodness, failure represents something. The move from failure to the goal is the means to the end. So let's look at this first vision of goodness I want to show you. I'm going to call it goodness gets. Goodness obtains desired results. In this figure, the green arrow represents goodness as a means of getting what we want. If we're good, we'll get the reward we're after. Because the green arrow is up the mountain but not atop the mountain, this means that the means and the ends are external to each other. The two are separable, not just distinguishable, but separable. I'll say more later about what I mean by this distinction because it'll become more important. What's an example of a goodness gets mentality? Well, in the ancient world, but not just the ancient world, the prime example is paganism, polytheism, whose objective is to get what we want and what we need by pleasing the powers. Maybe the powers are rulers, maybe the powers are gods or principalities. It doesn't really matter to the logic of goodness gets. The point is that we as agents are going to please those with the capacity to give us what we want. We'll do this on behalf of our tribe or our family or maybe just ourselves. Maybe my goal is a mate or success in my career or just living through the next winter. The example I want to use is actually not of a pagan or a polytheist, but a Jew, a figure in Jesus' famous parable of the prodigal son. The story is familiar. A father has 2 sons. One obeys and the other disobeys. The rendition of the story normally focuses on the disobedient son coming to his senses, coming back, and receiving the father's grace and restoration. I want to pick it up after that scene in verse 25. Now his older son was in the field, and as he came and drew near to the house after his day's work, he heard music and dancing. And he called one of the servants and asked what these things meant. And the servant said to him, "Your brother has come, and your father has killed the fattened calf, because he has received him back safe and sound." But he was angry and refused to go in. His father came out and entreated him, but he answered his father, "Look, these many years I've served you, and I never disobeyed your command. And yet you never gave me even a young goat that I might celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours came, who has devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fattened calf for him." This young man had absorbed a goodness gets mentality. And apparently he didn't get it from his father because his father's character is opposite. It's welcoming a son who has disgraced the family. And it goes without saying that in this parable, this young man and his family are not polytheistic pagans. They are loyal Jews. A goodness gets mentality can find its place in just about every culture. In fact, Jesus draws attention to another goodness gets scene in his next parable. He said to his disciples, "There was a rich man who had a manager, and charges were brought to him that this manager was wasting his possessions. And so the rich man called him and said, 'What is this that I hear about you? Turn in the account of your management, for you can no longer be manager.' Well, the manager said to himself, 'What shall I do since my master has taken the management away from me? I'm about to be fired. I'm not strong enough to dig, and I'm ashamed to beg. Hey, I know what I'll do so that when I'm removed from management, people may receive me into their houses. So summoning his master's debtors one by one, he said to the first one, "How much do you owe my master?" 100 measures of oil. And he said, "Take your bill and sit down quickly and write 50. And then he said to another, "How much do you owe?" 100 measures of wheat. Write down 80. Well, the master found out about this, and he commended the dishonest manager for his shrewdness. Is Jesus endorsing a goodness gets mentality? I'm going to cut a deal so that after I get fired, I have a place to land. Is Jesus commending that? No, but it is a goodness gets mentality, isn't it? So Jesus goes on and says, the sons of this world, the people whose minds are in this culture, are more shrewd in dealing with their own generation than the sons of light. Here you have people that realize how important it is to have somewhere to fall, and they're willing to sacrifice their honor in order to get it. So, Jesus tells his disciples, I tell you, make friends for yourselves by means of stuff, unrighteous wealth, so that when it fails, those people may receive you into the eternal dwellings. In other words, look beyond the present crisis and think about, where am I going to land? Where I want to land is in the kingdom of God. And so I'm going to cultivate the relationships that belong to the kingdom of God. Well, you're not going to do that dishonorably and get away with it. But Jesus is saying, look, you can even see in dishonest people some logic that you need to embrace. A goodness gets mentality is natural as we grow up as children. We don't have really sophisticated moral faculties. Instead, we know if I act a certain way, mom or dad is happy, and I like that. And so I want more of that. And so I guess I'll act the way that they ask me to. All right? There's a whole school of psychology and morality built around this called behaviorism, which we'll look at. You might say that behaviorism taps into a goodness gets framework. And it's a start. It's how children learn to be good. We respond to incentives and to disincentives. They're effective. However, a goodness gets mentality trains us to do no more than respond to incentives. We focus on developing the kinds of skills, the kinds of habits that earn the affirmation of people in power, the kinds of skills that yield success and prosperity in life. And that can distract us from the deeper question about whether the goal that we're after is really worth pursuing. Maybe goodness is more than just a means. Maybe goodness is a goal. We'll get to that next. Ironically, a stress on sheer obedience, even if it happens in the context of the Torah, the context of God's own covenant, a stress on sheer obedience fosters a goodness gets mindset. And this is one of the reasons why the prophets and the apostles in the Bible look back on the Torah and say, you know, that didn't work. Incentives and disincentives managed to make a difference, but they didn't make the crucial difference. What are some frustrations in a goodness gets mindset? Well, the powers might not deliver. The good son was disappointed when his father didn't give him what he wanted. And he thought, well, what was the point of being good all those years? He's going to look for an alternative, which in this case is anger and rebellion against his father, and rejection of his father's forgiveness and grace, rejection of his newfound brother. He's going to turn his back on his family because he's upset that the powers didn't deliver what he wanted. Another frustration of a goodness gets mindset is that we remain subordinate to those powers. We're always their clients. We're always their supplicants. We become yes men, people who just do what's expected, who are good just for the sake of the rewards. And that jeopardizes our moral integrity, as you see in the example of the dishonest steward. And so the frustrations of a goodness gets mindset yield to shortcuts. People look for ways of getting what they want, whether or not they're good. Hypocrisy is one of those ways. If I act good, and if I get people's approval, I can really live a different life underneath, and I'll get what I want. Another shortcut is Machiavellianism. I'm just going to get what I want, and I don't care whether I'm good or bad to do it. You might say that the disobedient son in Jesus' parable tries that route, and he only really gives up on it after it fails. Well, that was a shortcut. Anyway, other means, like hypocrisy, get results too. Sometimes they get better results. and then we're going to abandon being good. Besides, is being good only to please the powerful? Is it really being good? Or is it just acting good? We only keep up the act as long as it works, and as long as we don't see a more effective way of meeting our desires. People who no longer believe in a goodness gets vision may well move on to the next strategy.